Oh. Hello guys, I'm going to interview this guy Andy today. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Andy Korth. I'm the lead programmer on the game called Verdant Skies.
Awesome. In a nutshell, what kind of game are we talking about?
Yeah, Verdant Skies is a life simulation game, so I put it in the same kind of category as Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley or maybe Animal Crossing. You land on an empty planet, and it's your job to bring other people to come join you on the colony. So you can eventually unlock up to 12 characters, and you can date or marry any of them. So that's a big part of games like this. And other than that, the game features exploration, farming, crafting, and kind of puts a sci-fi tilt on a lot of those features. So as you grow crops, you can genetically splice them together in order to create crops with new traits. Same with the animals that you grow, you can splice their DNA together to get new traits on those. So it offers that's one of the things that people have really liked about the game.
So you're mixing animals and you're marrying in-game people.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Why did you choose to make a game like this?
So we started the game about 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago, and I had just played Harvest Moon: A New Beginning on the 3DS, and I felt that I could make a game in that genre, but unlocked content really slowly.
What? What did you say?
You move really slowly through the content, and the dialogue was not very interesting, not very deep. The characters were very shallow and kind of uninteresting, and it had a lot of like messing around with tool switching in the menus and things like that. So I also knew that having a lot of shader development experience, that we could bring a new level, a different level of graphical fidelity to it. And even after Stardew Valley came out halfway through development, which has a very pixel art style, I felt that we've got reflections in water, shadows, perspective effects, and things like that that would make our game look and feel a lot different from the other ones in the genre.
Okay, well, a part of what you said fell away. I think the connection was not really well.
Okay.
But I think I got most of it.
Should I try to... Okay.
Did the game become what you originally planned it to become before you started development?
I think we definitely achieved our goals of having a lot more narrative depth. All the characters have problems and reasons that they left Earth, basically, to come to this new planet. So they've got, and it touches on, more interesting topics like alcoholism and, other problems that they had in their life. So narrative, there's a lot of branching dialogue. I think we really hit that goal. We've both stayed faithful to kind of the core mechanics of kind of time management throughout your day, but we've introduced a lot of new mechanics to the genre, and I'm really happy with how that worked out. So yeah, I think most of what we envisioned worked out really well.
Okay, great. What inspired you to become an indie game developer?
So we've been doing... when I got out of college, I wrote database software kind of for about 1.5 years for schools, so the school could track their attendance, how much lunch money the kids had, what their grades were, and I didn't find that to be very fulfilling. The work wasn't very interesting, so I've been doing game development for about 10 years since then, and a lot of that's contract work. But of course, you've got great ideas for your own games, and you want to publish them yourself. So, everybody's got game ideas, but yeah, I just really wanted to share this with the world.
So you came out of a job you didn't like because you were doing things that were not interesting enough.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of the same stuff every day, where someone types data into a website, and then someone looks at the data on the website, and It's different data every day, but really it's the same project, same program through the whole time.
I can imagine that.
Yeah, and in games it's very dynamic. You're doing drastically different things every day, and you're on the bleeding edge of technological advancements and things like that. So I like that.
Yeah, you're putting your creativity in it.
Yeah.
Is this your first game?
No, our first game was a game called Cran Ball, which came out for Mac and PC, and also it came out for iOS right when the App Store launched. And it was a physics-based color matcher before there were a million of them. And it did pretty well for us, but very quickly the App Store market got crowded, and we started doing contract work after that in contract game development and physics engine development, things like that. And but this is our first game that we've released on Steam.
So when you do contract work, that's more to just stay alive, or did you do that because you actually like that at that moment?
Both. It's well for us. It's worked out well because the pay is good, and we have the option to choose what projects we work on. So if someone comes to us with something that's not very interesting, we can just pass on that opportunity and wait for an interesting game that they're working on, or an interesting platform, or technology choices, and things like that. So it's been a lot of fun, and we've done dozens upon dozens of contracts and projects since then.
For what platforms did you intend to release this game?
So Steam has been the main platform, so targeted Mac and PC to our development on Macs, actually, and have basically forever. We are considering some other platforms, especially Switch. So we'll see how that goes.
Switch is really cool. There are not a lot of games for it yet.
Yeah, and it's a really good platform match for Verdant Skies, because the Nintendo platforms often will have the Harvest Moon games on them, and it's something that you can pick up and play for a little while, put down, bring with you. So I think it's a really good match.
That sure is. What do you think is your best attitude in life?
Like, I think, especially as an indie developer, the main thing you need is an attitude that you're willing to stick for a long amount of time. Like, it's easy to get distracted and do something else, but really commit yourself to an idea, or commit yourself to a goal, and work on that for a long time. And I think that's what pays off. Being able to coordinate your, make a plan for completing something that's that big too, is a great kind of attitude or skill set to have.
For how long have you been working on this project?
We've been working on Verdant Skies in its current iteration for about 3 years. It started a little bit before that in a engine that we were being paid to work on, and so I would use that and start off the game. And when that money dried up, we kind of ended up switching it to a homebrew engine, and then I realized that I would have to write a bunch of UI libraries to put windows on the screen and buttons and lay them out and text and all that stuff. And I was like, nope. So we switched to Unity, and we've been working on that for about 3 years until the release in mid-February.
So you've been using Unity. Why did you choose to use Unity?
So about half of our contract work, maybe a little more, is done in Unity, so we're really familiar with it. The main reason for me was just it would definitely have cross-platform support, which we could probably have managed on our own, but it also has a built-in particle system, built-in UI library, and those were the elements that I needed and didn't want to write myself. Every game uses a different subset of this huge number of features that Unity uses, but those were the that were important for this project.
What was your day-to-day process for making this game?
So it kind of varied a little bit. I think the big thing for me is maintaining a schedule is really helpful. As an indie developer, you can set your own schedule, and I think it's easy for people to mess that up. But I try to get up at around 8 every day to work and start working and work until 5 p.m. or so. So maintaining that schedule is really helpful for me, and you don't want to burn yourself out by working crazy hours or not getting enough sleep. It would kind of vary because depending on our contract workload, there might be weeks where I'd only work on it maybe a little bit on the weekend, or might be working Monday, Wednesday, Friday on one project and Tuesday, Thursday on Verdant Skies. So it would kind of vary, but maintaining a schedule is really important. Maintaining a to-do list, so every day you have a place to look and say, if you say, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to work on today, you can open up that to-do list and pick something off there to work on.
There is nothing to do today, let's go to bed.
Yeah, believe it or not, the to-do list is never empty. It fills up about as fast as it empties, so
I
there's
know,
always like
I have the
things
same
on
problem, that's why I said that.
Yeah.
When you finally have done
Yeah,
everything, you're like, oh, the new to-do list is already there.
Yeah, definitely.
Will your day-to-day process be the same for potential future games you make?
So the day-to-day process being the same for future work?
Mm-hmm. Would you do it
Yeah,
the same?
I think this has worked pretty well, and I try to use that process for my future games, my personal projects, and also my like contract work too, because often your clients don't care when you work, but it really helps to have a schedule for yourself.
What makes this game different from others?
Especially in the same genre, we have a much stronger focus on narrative. And this comes out through, there are 380,000 words in the game, which ends up putting it at pretty close to the size of a huge novel like War and Peace or like Game of Thrones novel. So there's a lot of narrative in the game, and it branches, and people remember what you say. They'll bring it up, like the wedding events for the different characters have this big section where they kind of go through all the things that you've told them, all the decisions you've made, and they bring up why that's important to them during the marriage ceremonies. So that's one really big difference. I think we have differentiated our... When we started the game, all the competition, everything else in the genre was 2D, and we really stepped up the graphics in that 2D space with, and I think that was a good way for us to appear different and give a different feeling to the game. I think those are some of the biggest things. I mean, of course the sci-fi tilt and the fishing mini game and the splicing of genes, well, for both the plants and the animals, is a major mechanic that is different from anything else.
What do you think is the most interesting part of this game?
Yeah, the gene splicing for sure. For me, was one of the most interesting parts, because It's really a new mechanic, and it went under a lot of iteration for us to get it working in a way that made sense to players. It started right now. You get to choose the point at which you splice the genes, and you get half of the genes from the left crop and half of the genes from the right crop, and you get to pick where that splice happens. At the first time we started, it was random. It would pick them at random. So you'd have to do a lot of steps to work something out. If you wanted something specific with a random splicer, you'd be sitting there all day. So we changed how that worked. We've changed the interface a lot to make it make as much sense as possible, and it's really unique. From the developer side of view, one of the goals was to minimize the amount of tool switching. So this is really transparent to the players. The players, wouldn't notice unless they're asked. But every time you interact with something, it picks the correct tool automatically, and the items also go into food goes into your fridge automatically. Building materials go into your backpack. Seeds go into the seed chest, and that saves you from spending a lot of your time sorting through UIs and dragging things back and forth.
So the character is carrying a fridge with him.
It teleports to your fridge. It's the future, so teleportation is totally a valid excuse for how that got in your fridge.
I would just have let him carry a fridge.
Yeah, I mean there were people who so instead of watering things with a watering can, which is kind of the standard in the genre, you use a hose. You have a big tank with water in it and a hose. The reason from a design point of view is that's one fewer tool that you would have to carry, and instead you get to interact with the environment to have that interaction. But there were definitely people who would carry a watering tank around, and whenever they wanted to water something, they'd put it down, use the hose, and then put it back in their backpack. So it happens.
What setbacks did you encounter while making the project? And do you feel like you learned something from that?
I don't think we had too many major setbacks. I think the project took longer than I had hoped it would take, and that's always a challenge. Did I learn from that? Gee, I hope so. I think it would have been... Yeah, I'm not sure what we could have done, because, some of the delays were because we underestimated the huge amount of writing that would go into the game. So that took a lot longer than expected. And then some things that we couldn't do anything about would be, sometimes I would have to stop and do contracting work to finish the project, to make some money so I could finish the project. So, but I don't think we didn't really have any major technical setbacks, or we didn't lose any backups or anything like that. So all that kind of stuff went smoothly.
Well, that's important.
Yeah.
It's also important that you made sure that you had money to make it. Otherwise you would have been bankrupt after you finished the project. That sucks.
Yeah, or bankrupt halfway through the project, which happens. Yeah, so... Yeah, we were careful about that. We did planning. We keep track of how much money you spend on your own, so you know if you're going to make it or not. Yeah, budgeting is an important part of it, for sure.
That's very important. If you could go back in time, what would you do different?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe another writer would have helped just with the workload, especially really early on. It's hard to say. I've been considering whether we should have done a 3D character instead of a 2D character. There are about 3,000 clothing sprites in the game. That's all 4 direct. So in all 4 directions, you have to draw 7 walking frames for each piece of clothing. And there's shoes, there's pants, there's shirts, there's hair, there's accessories. So there's a lot of categories. So you draw. So it was a huge amount of artwork, and people felt that there wasn't enough character animation even with. And that we could have had a lot more character animation because you can animate something once and it'll work with whatever clothing that there were. It would have also taken away from the hand drawn of the game. More recently, there have been games who have kind of maintained somewhat a stylistic look to 3D characters. That wasn't so much the case when we started the game. So I don't know. I mean, that could have been very different, and the game would have looked different as a result.
Yeah, if you do the difference between 2D and 3D, that looks really different. Yes.
Yeah, even games like Rune Factory on the 3DS had 2D backgrounds, or like Final Fantasy VII, if you're familiar, the 2D backgrounds and then 3D characters running around in it. That would have been a potential way to go, but who knows?
Maybe next game. If you can advise a new indie game developer, what will you tell him?
Do something else? No.
Make another type of game, not this type.
Yeah, I think. Well, it's tough because a lot of new indie developers make small arcade and puzzle games, which it's definitely a good idea to start that way. And our first games were like that. But it's really tough to interest people when there's so many, small arcade games or small puzzle games out there. Like it's tough to compete in that space. I think the main suggestion is to be responsible with your expectations and how much time you spend on a title. Make sure to actually release it. Don't just keep working on it forever and never release it. Watch your budget. If you can do game development work on a contract and get paid for it, then you're developing your skill and making money. So if you can find those opportunities, they're pretty good to help you out as an indie developer making your own game too.
What do you feel is success for an indie game developer?
I think it's certainly going to be different for different people, but for me, I would be really happy to be able to make enough money off my own indie games to do that full time without having contract work. That would mean that you made it as an indie developer, I think, in my opinion.
So to be able to sustain yourself from just your own games.
Yeah, exactly.
To help other developers learn, what resources would you recommend?
Yeah, the best thing I think you can do is go to game jams. The Global Game Jam happens in January worldwide, and it's a phenomenal opportunity to meet other gamers, to work with them. You can learn a huge amount from them, and because you're often finishing a game in 24 hours or 48 hours, you learn a huge amount in that time, and you don't get bogged down by details. And then you can set that aside and do it again at a different game jam. So you get a lot of experience in a very small amount of time. And
we do game jams at CFN too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
and
the next one is in April. We always make streams of the games and everything. by giving feedback, we hope to help the developers that do our game jams. So I do recognize
Yeah, that's
that.
really cool. How long do they run? Like, is it
We mostly
24
go
hours?
for 2 weekends, so 10 to 12
Okay.
days. Because we are thinking about the people that have jobs and need to go there.
Yeah.
The people that aren't
Yeah, that's
full-time
awesome.
indie game
The,
developers.
Yeah. The last game jam, my business partner and I made a Nintendo game, and we got it on an actual original Nintendo cartridge, a flash cart, and ran it on an actual Nintendo. So you get to do crazy things that at a game jam that you'd never do, for real, for a professional situation.
You could try it. Release a game for like an old Nintendo, but I don't think that a lot of people will buy it because most people don't have those consoles anymore.
Yeah, and then you have to manufacture carts and send them out. Like, people have done it, but it's definitely a huge amount of effort.
I think it's
But,
too much
for a game
effort for
jam,
the
it's a
amount
lot
of
of
sales you
fun.
can get out of it.
Yeah. Hmm.
What do you think about the current marketing strategies for the indie game industry?
I think marketing is a bit of a weak point for me. So I'm not exactly sure what the current marketing strategies are. I mean, the main thing is you put it on Steam and hope it works out, I guess. That seems that seems to be what you do, unless you're making mobile games, in which case, like, I don't know. I mean, we got out of mobile gaming before micro, so thankfully we didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. I guess marketing is really tough, and if anyone how to do it, let me know.
I know how to do it. No, really.
Yeah.
It's my profession.
Well,
so.
yeah. Yeah, I don't like. Well, I don't know. What do you have suggestions?
Of course, I have suggestions, but I also have a price tag.
Yeah, sure.
Where do you see the indie game market going in a few years?
I've noticed the trend that the costs of game development have gone up. The inflations are rising, and there's less of a market or less room for viable products that are made really cheaply, it seems. So I guess it'll be harder and harder for indie developers to compete in the industry space, is what it seems like. That's my suspicion as to where it's going.
Well, that's already happening. There's 30 games a day releasing.
Yep.
Have you worked for other gaming companies?
We've done contract work for a lot of them. Clients like Warner Brothers and Disney. Some educational games for local companies here in Minnesota in the United States. So we've certainly had opportunities to work with a lot of other, different properties and. None of them have been like big AAA games, although we have done games on for the Nintendo 3DS, one and PS4. So we've worked on a bunch of stuff.
Did you do any gaming education at school, or did you learn the whole development process on your own?
Both. Howling Moon Software is me and Scott Lemke, and we both have computer science degrees. So we got a traditional computer science education, and that's probably why we focus mostly on the programming and technical side of things. And that included a little education on like the general software development process, but all of the game-specific development and, you know, OpenGL, DirectX, all the tools and tech that we've learned has been on our own.
Now we're going a little for the personal side. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Morris, Minnesota, in the United States. Minnesota is basically right in the middle, up on top next to Canada. Some people consider Minnesota to be interchangeable with Canadians. But yeah, it was a small town, and there wasn't much to do out there, so maybe that's what drew me towards computers, and I certainly did a lot of computer gaming and that kind of stuff when I was a kid.
So you were a game developer because your town was boring as a child.
Yeah, I don't know, that might make sense. It was a really good place to grow up, and you know, you don't have any distractions unless they're ones you've made yourself.
Okay. What were your childhood interests?
Yeah, I mean, gaming was a big part of it. I did programming even as a pretty young kid. I would program, you know, games in BASIC, and they were pretty ridiculous things where you'd type stuff like "go west" and it would tell you that you died because you fell in a hole, and there was no reason to believe that would happen, but it just happened. And in, you know, high school, I would write programs and games for graphing calculators, and eventually in college I started doing more, you know, real programming. But I never really expected, throughout that time, I never really expected to be a game developer. I just really liked making games and assumed I would do something in some sort of programming somewhere else. But when I found out how boring that could potentially be, I moved towards game development. Yeah.
Well, that was also the last question. I'm
Yeah.
out of questions. Is there
anything
other
else?
things you want to say about the game or yourself?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool.
I think that's a pretty comprehensive list of questions.
Yeah, I tried to cover everything in the questions. But that was it then. So,
Alright,
yeah,
well,
thank you
very
for
much.
taking your time.
And